Welcome to the Soul Dark Romance Stories. The channel will bring you stories of strong bonds, cultural differences, passionate love, and unforgettable dramatic events. If you love interracial love stories and cinematic storytelling, then this is the place for you. Enjoy listening. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories. I mocked the black waitress in Korean so my men could laugh at her. 30 seconds later, I realized she understood every word I said. The night it happened, Manhattan was wrapped in cold rain and neon lights, and the restaurant called Hanul Table glowed like a jewel in the middle of the street. It was the kind of place rich businessmen used to prove they had taste. Dark wood walls, quiet jazz, servers moving like shadows. The smell of sesame oil and grilled beef floated through the air. It was also my territory. My name is Kong Jae-min. In certain circles in New York, people speak that name very carefully. Some say I am a businessman who controls shipping routes between Korea and the United States. Others whisper that I control much more than that. They are all correct in different ways. I arrived at the restaurant just after 9 that night. 2 of my men walked behind me. They did not speak. They never needed to. When I entered a room, silence followed like a shadow. The owner bowed so low I thought his forehead might hit the floor. He always looked terrified when I came, which amused me more than it should have. I took my usual table near the back, where I could see every door and every reflection in the mirrors. Habit. In my life you survived by seeing danger before it saw you. A waitress approached a moment later. She moved carefully, balancing a tray with quiet precision. Her uniform was simple black. Her hair was tied back in a tight bun. Dark skin, calm eyes, posture straight. I barely looked at her at first. To me she was simply another employee serving another meal. In places like this, people like me were treated like kings, and people like her were invisible. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Hanul Table. My name is Amara. I will be serving you tonight. Her voice was steady, professional, almost too calm. I finally looked up from my watch and studied her for a moment. Something about her confidence felt unusual for a waitress dealing with men like me. But I dismissed the thought. I had come to relax, to eat, to entertain my men. Sometimes entertainment meant humiliating someone weaker. It was a cruel habit I never bothered to correct. I leaned back in my chair and switched to Korean, speaking fast and casually to the 2 men beside me. Look at her. She probably thinks kimchi is just spicy cabbage. They laughed immediately, the kind of laughter men give when their boss expects it. I continued in the thick Busan dialect of my childhood, letting my words spill out quickly. Americans never understand our food. Especially this one. I doubt she knows anything about Korea beyond barbecue. I let the insult hang there for a moment, enjoying the small performance. Then I added one more sentence, sharper and more venomous, a racist joke that made the men beside me snort with laughter. The waitress remained perfectly still beside the table. I assumed she understood nothing. I expected the usual reaction when I turned back to English. Confusion, apology, perhaps embarrassment. Instead, she tilted her head slightly and answered in flawless Korean. Not the textbook Korean foreigners learn in language schools, but the exact same rough Busan dialect I had used. Actually, sir, people from real Busan would never pronounce that word the way you just did. If my grandmother heard that accent, she would send you back to Seoul to start again. The restaurant suddenly felt very quiet. My men stopped laughing. One of them nearly dropped his glass. I stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. The waitress met my eyes calmly, completely unafraid. There was intelligence there. Sharp intelligence. Something dangerous in its confidence. I switched back to English slowly. Who are you? Just a waitress, sir, she replied politely. Would you like to order your drink now? Before I could respond, the front door of the restaurant slammed open. One of my guards rushed inside, breathing hard. Boss, the Shanghai crew found you. Gunshots cracked outside in the street, sharp and sudden. Screams erupted from the dining room as customers dove under tables. Glass shattered near the entrance. My instincts took over instantly. I stood, grabbing the waitress by the arm and pulling her down beside the table as another shot blasted through the window. Stay behind me, I told her quietly. In that moment, the strange truth hit me harder than the gunfire outside. The woman I had just mocked understood my language perfectly. And now she was caught in the middle of a war meant for me. The first gunshot shattered the quiet elegance of Hanul Table like a hammer striking glass. For a fraction of a second, the entire restaurant froze, as if everyone needed a moment to understand that the sharp crack echoing through the room was not a champagne cork or a dropped tray. Then the second shot came, louder, closer, followed by screaming. Chairs scraped violently across the polished floor as diners dove for cover. Wine glasses tipped over and rolled across tables, spilling red across white tablecloths like spreading blood. My instincts took control before my thoughts could catch up. I grabbed Amara's wrist and pulled her down beside the heavy wooden table just as another bullet punched through the front window. Glass exploded inward in a glittering storm. "Stay behind me," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the chaos erupting around us. The two men who had entered with me were already moving. One crouched behind a column near the entrance, drawing the pistol concealed beneath his jacket. The other dragged a terrified couple toward the kitchen door to get them out of the line of fire. Outside, tires screeched against wet pavement, and another burst of gunfire rattled against the restaurant facade. I did not need confirmation to know who had come. Only one group had the nerve to attack me openly in Manhattan. The Shanghai crew had finally decided to stop waiting and start a war. Amara stayed exactly where I had placed her, crouched low behind the table. What surprised me was not her fear, but her composure. Most civilians panicked when bullets started flying. They screamed, ran, made themselves easy targets. She did none of those things. Instead, she kept her head low and watched the entrance with sharp focus, as if analyzing every movement. Another man from my crew rushed in through the back corridor and slid beside me on the floor. 3 cars outside, he whispered. Maybe 6 shooters. Of course they would bring numbers. The Shanghai gang had always preferred brute force. I glanced toward the shattered front windows and counted shadows moving through the rain. 6, maybe 7 figures spreading along the sidewalk, their silhouettes distorted by flashing police lights somewhere down the block. They expected to trap me inside the restaurant. They did not realize they had chosen the wrong battlefield. "We need to move," I muttered. "The back exit." Another shot cracked through the air, splintering the wooden bar. Someone screamed again near the kitchen. My guard returned fire from behind the column, forcing the attackers to take cover behind parked cars outside. For a brief moment the gunfire paused, both sides waiting for the other to make the next move. I turned to Amara. "Can you walk?" She gave a short nod. "Of course." "Good. Stay close to me." We crouched low and moved quickly toward the kitchen corridor while my men continued firing toward the entrance to keep the attackers distracted. The hallway behind the dining room smelled of garlic and hot oil, but now the scent was mixed with smoke and fear. Kitchen staff huddled behind metal counters, while the chef barked frantic orders in Korean. When he saw me, his face drained of color. "Boss, the back alley is clear for now." For now was all I needed. I pushed open the heavy freezer door leading to the service corridor that connected to the alley behind the building. The narrow passage was dim and cold, lit only by a flickering overhead bulb. The sudden quiet felt strange after the chaos of gunfire. For a moment there was only the hum of refrigeration units and the distant echo of shouting from the dining room. Amara leaned against the wall, catching her breath. I studied her again, more carefully this time. She had not cried. She had not begged. She simply observed everything around her like someone piecing together a puzzle. "You move like someone who has been in dangerous places before," I said. She gave a faint smile. "You carry a gun in a restaurant. I think the same could be said about you." Despite the situation, a quiet laugh escaped me. "Fair enough." Another burst of gunfire echoed faintly from the front of the building. My men were still holding the entrance, but they could not do it forever. I needed to know how many attackers waited outside before moving into the alley. As I considered my options, Amara suddenly spoke again. "They are not all Chinese." I looked at her sharply. "What did you say?" "The men outside," she replied calmly. "When they shouted earlier, I heard 2 different accents. Some are from Shanghai, but one group sounded like they were speaking Northern Mandarin, possibly hired shooters. They are arguing about who should move first." For a moment, I simply stared at her. Most people would not even recognize Mandarin during a gunfight. She had not only recognized it, she had identified different regional accents. "How do you know that?" I asked. "I studied languages in college," she said quietly. "Mandarin, Korean, a few others. I spent a year living in Busan." That explained the dialect, but not the calm intelligence behind her eyes. I stepped closer to the narrow window at the end of the corridor and glanced outside into the alley. Rain poured steadily onto the asphalt, reflecting the red glow of distant traffic lights. No attackers in sight. They were focused on the front entrance, just as I hoped. "We are leaving through the alley," I said. "Once we reach the street, my driver will meet us 2 blocks south." Amara hesitated. "And after that?" "After that," I replied, my voice low and certain, "you cannot go home tonight. They saw your face in there. Anyone connected to me becomes a target once bullets start flying." She folded her arms, frustration flashing in her eyes. "I did not ask to be part of your war." "No," I said quietly. "But now you are. And whether you like it or not, I am the only reason you are still alive." Rain hammered the alley behind Hanul's table as we stepped out of the narrow service corridor. The sound of gunfire from the front of the restaurant echoed faintly through the night, but back here the city seemed strangely quiet, as if Manhattan itself was holding its breath. Water pooled on the pavement and reflected the glow of distant streetlights. I scanned the alley automatically, every shadow, every movement, every possible threat. Years in my world had trained my mind to map danger before it appeared. Satisfied that the alley was clear for the moment, I motioned for Amara to follow. She moved beside me quickly but carefully, her shoes splashing through shallow puddles as we hurried toward the narrow exit that opened onto the street 2 blocks south. A black sedan rolled slowly to the curb just as we reached the corner. My driver leaned across the passenger seat and pushed the door open without a word. Amara hesitated for half a second before climbing inside. I slid in after her and shut the door firmly. The car pulled away immediately, blending into the late-night traffic that crawled through the wet Manhattan streets. Only when the restaurant had disappeared behind us did I finally exhale. My phone vibrated in my pocket with a message from one of my men still at the scene. 2 attackers down. The rest retreating. No police yet. Typical. In this city, sirens often arrived long after the violence was finished. Amara sat stiffly beside me, staring out the rain-streaked window as neon signs blurred across the glass. For a few minutes neither of us spoke. The silence inside the car felt heavier than the gunfire we had just escaped. Finally she turned toward me, her voice calm but edged with anger. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere safe," I replied. "My place." She frowned immediately. "I am not going to your house." "It is not a house," I said. "It is a penthouse. And tonight it is the only place where you will not be followed by men who want you dead." Her eyes narrowed. "I was not part of whatever business you were doing tonight. I should not be dragged into it." "You were seen with me during a gang attack," I said quietly. "In my world, that is enough reason to make you a target." The words hung between us. She looked away again, clearly furious, but she did not argue further. Deep down, she understood the truth of what I was saying. People connected to me rarely had peaceful lives. 20 minutes later, the car stopped in front of a sleek tower of glass overlooking the East River. My building was one of the tallest in the district, its upper floors invisible behind mist and low clouds. Security cameras tracked every entrance, and 2 guards stood near the private elevator lobby. They nodded respectfully when I entered, but their eyes flicked briefly toward Amara with curiosity. The elevator rose silently to the top floor. When the doors opened, the penthouse spread before us in quiet luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glowing skyline of Manhattan, bridges stretching across dark water like ribbons of light. The city looked calm from up here, peaceful, as if gunfights and gang wars did not exist. Amara stepped inside slowly, studying the room. "This place is bigger than the entire apartment building where I live." I poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher and handed one to her. "You are safe here." She accepted the glass but did not drink. Instead, she leaned against the marble counter, watching me carefully. Up close, I could see exhaustion beneath her calm expression, the kind that followed a night when death came too close. "Why do you do this?" she asked suddenly. "Do what?" "Live like this. Guns. Enemies. War in restaurants." I considered the question longer than I expected. People rarely asked me why. They simply assumed men like me were born monsters. "I came to this country when I was 13, I said finally. My family had nothing. My father worked 2 jobs and still could not pay rent. In the neighborhood where we lived, violence was normal. Power was survival. So you became the most powerful man in the room. I became the man no one could push around again." Amara studied my face carefully, as if searching for something hidden beneath the words. Maybe she expected cruelty or arrogance. Instead, she found honesty. Then she surprised me again. I studied linguistics in college, she said quietly. Korean, Mandarin, Japanese. I lived in Busan for a year. That explains the dialect. She nodded. My mother was a teacher. She believed language opens doors between cultures. But student loans open prison doors for the poor. When she got sick, I needed money quickly. Waiting tables paid the bills. For a moment the room fell silent again. Two strangers from completely different worlds standing in the same kitchen at 3 a.m. My phone buzzed again on the counter. Another message from my security team. I glanced down at the screen and felt my expression harden. What is it? Amara asked. Someone is watching your mother's apartment building. Her eyes widened. That is impossible. The message contained a photograph taken from across the street. A dark sedan parked outside a small brick building in Brooklyn. 2 men inside the car. The Shanghai gang works fast, I said quietly. They saw you with me tonight. Now they think you are leverage. Fear flickered across her face for the first time since the attack. This is your war, she whispered. Yes, I said softly. But now they believe you are part of it. She looked toward the window, the endless lights of Manhattan reflecting in her eyes. When she turned back to me, the anger had returned, stronger than before. You brought danger into my life. I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. No, I said. I am the only thing keeping you alive. The silence that followed my words hung heavy in the penthouse. Amara stared at me as if weighing whether to believe anything I said. Outside the windows, the lights of Manhattan stretched endlessly across the dark horizon. But inside the room, the air felt tight, electric with tension. Finally, she shook her head slowly and stepped away from the counter. This is insane, she said quietly. I was serving tables an hour ago. Now you are telling me gangsters are watching my mother's apartment. I did not answer immediately because there was nothing comforting to say. The world I lived in did not allow for comfort, only survival. I picked up my phone again and sent 3 quick messages to my security team. Within seconds, replies appeared confirming that 2 men in the sedan had already been identified as low-level associates of the Shanghai crew. They were not professionals. They were watchers, waiting for orders. We are going to Brooklyn, I said. Amara turned sharply. No, absolutely not. If they are outside my mother's building, you cannot bring more trouble there. I am not bringing trouble, I replied calmly. I am ending it. Before she could argue again, I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair and headed toward the elevator. After a moment of hesitation, she followed. The elevator ride down felt longer than before, as if the building itself understood we were descending into something darker than the quiet safety of the penthouse. When the doors opened, the driver was already waiting in the underground garage. His expression changed slightly when he saw my face. Trouble, boss? Always, I answered. Brooklyn. The car cut through the sleeping city quickly, tires hissing across wet pavement as rain continued to fall in thin silver lines. Amara sat beside me in silence, staring straight ahead while the skyline slipped past the windows. I could feel the tension radiating from her, anger mixed with fear. Anyone dragged into my life without warning reacted the same way. Eventually, the towers of Manhattan faded behind us, and the narrower streets of Brooklyn appeared. The car slowed as we approached the address from the photograph. There it is, the driver said quietly. Across the street from a small brick apartment building, a dark sedan sat idling beneath a flickering streetlight. 2 silhouettes were visible through the windshield. One smoking, one watching the entrance. Amara inhaled sharply. That is my mother's building. Stay here, I told her. Before she could protest, I opened the door and stepped into the rain. The cold air smelled like asphalt and wet concrete. The 2 men in the sedan noticed me immediately. One of them reached toward the glove compartment where a weapon was likely hidden. I walked directly toward the car without slowing. Confidence often worked better than violence. When I reached the driver's window, I tapped the glass once. The man inside lowered it halfway, clearly unsure who I was, but unwilling to appear afraid. You boys look lost, I said in Mandarin. Both men froze. The driver's eyes widened slightly. People rarely expected a Korean gangster to speak their language. You should leave, the passenger muttered. I leaned closer so they could see my face clearly beneath the streetlight. I believe you work for Mr. Liang. If you return to him, tell him Kong Jae-min personally delivered this message. If anyone from his organization comes near this building again, I will burn every warehouse he owns along the East Coast. The passenger swallowed. They understood exactly what that meant. In our world, threats were currency, and my reputation had already been spent in many cities. The driver started the engine without another word. The sedan pulled away quickly, disappearing into the wet darkness of the street. Only when the red tail lights vanished did I turn back toward the car where Amara waited. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "That is it?" she asked quietly. "They just leave." "For tonight," I said. She shook her head slowly, as if trying to understand the strange rules of a world she had never seen before. I opened the passenger door, and she stepped out onto the sidewalk beside me. "You should go inside and check on your mother." She hesitated. "You are not coming." "I cannot. If they see me enter this building, it becomes a target again tomorrow." For a moment, she simply studied my face. The anger from earlier had softened, replaced by something more complicated. "You really did come here just to protect us." I met her eyes. "I told you. I am the only thing keeping you alive." She nodded slowly, then turned toward the building entrance. But before she reached the door, she stopped and looked back at me. "You are a criminal, Kong Jae-min." I gave a small shrug. "That is not news. But you came here alone to protect a waitress and her sick mother." The rain fell quietly between us as the city hummed in the distance. I did not know how to answer that question because the truth surprised me as much as it surprised her. In my world, people were assets or enemies. Amara Thompson was supposed to be neither. "Then why are you still here?" she asked softly. I looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "Because you are the first person in years who spoke to me without fear." Something shifted in her expression when she heard that. Not trust. Not yet. But the wall between us had cracked. She opened the building door and stepped inside. I waited on the sidewalk until the light in her mother's apartment window turned on 3 floors above us. Only then did I turn and walk back toward the car. Behind me, the door opened again, and Amara's voice called out through the rain. "Gang." I turned. She stood in the doorway, her hair damp from the mist, eyes shining under the streetlight. "You are a monster," she said quietly. Then she smiled in a way that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. "But you are the only monster who never lied to me." 3 months passed before I saw Amara Thompson again. In my world, 3 months could feel like a lifetime. Wars began and ended in that span of time. Alliances shifted, enemies disappeared, and the balance of power moved quietly beneath the surface of the city. The conflict with the Shanghai crew did not end the night outside her mother's building. It escalated. Warehouses burned along the docks. Illegal casinos closed overnight. Men who once worked for Liang vanished from the streets of Queens and Chinatown. Violence was not something I ever celebrated, but it was a language men like Liang understood. By the end of the 2nd month, his organization had collapsed piece by piece, stripped of its influence until only silence remained where his power once lived. My empire was larger than before, yet strangely it felt emptier. I still drove through Brooklyn sometimes, passing the small brick building where Amara lived with her mother. I never stopped. That had been our agreement. She had her life, and I had mine. 2 different worlds that should never have touched in the first place. But fate has a strange way of ignoring the rules men try to create. One quiet morning in early spring, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of a small cafe in Brooklyn called Harbor Brew. The place smelled of fresh coffee and warm bread. A chalkboard menu hung on the wall, handwritten in careful letters. Behind the counter stood Amara Thompson, tying an apron around her waist as she prepared to open for the day. The cafe had only been open for 2 weeks, but already neighbors filled the tables every morning. It was her place now, built with a loan from a small business program and a lot of stubborn determination. The door chimed softly as I stepped inside. She looked up immediately. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The morning light caught in her dark eyes as recognition slowly spread across her face. I noticed she seemed different somehow. Stronger, calmer, as if the chaos of that night had become only a distant memory. "You look alive," she said finally. I gave a small smile. "It has been a busy few months." I placed a small set of keys on the counter between us. She glanced down at them, confused. "What are those?" "I sold everything," I said simply. Her eyebrows lifted in disbelief. "Everything. The casinos, the shipping routes, the businesses. All of it." She leaned against the counter, studying my face carefully as if searching for a lie. "Why?" I looked around the cafe. Sunlight, quiet laughter from customers, the smell of coffee instead of gunpowder. A life that existed far away from the world I had built. Because the first woman who understood my language also understood my soul. For a moment Amara said nothing. Then she shook her head softly, half amused, half amazed. Finally she poured a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter toward me. Then sit down, Kang Jae-min, she said gently. Your coffee is on the house. And that is how a war that began with arrogance ended with something neither of us expected. A Korean mafia boss who once ruled half the shadows of New York walked away from power. A black waitress who had been invisible to the world built a new life from courage and quiet strength. Sometimes the most dangerous battles are not fought with guns, but with the choice to become someone different. Kang Jae-min and Amara Thompson were never supposed to meet. Yet one cruel joke in a restaurant changed both their lives forever. If this story surprised you, take a second to support the channel. Tap the like button so more people can discover stories like this. Subscribe for more dramatic romance, powerful underdog moments, and unforgettable mafia love stories. And tell me in the comments, if you were in Amara's place that night, would you have trusted the mafia boss or walked away forever? Your answer might surprise even you.